In the twilight of humanity's first golden age of space exploration, no one expected the Zarkali to arrive in absolute silence. Their ships, resembling crystalline structures that absorbed light rather than reflected it, simply appeared one day in high orbit above New Haven, humanity's most distant colony. The first sign that something was wrong came not from military sensors or government alerts, but from a school teacher named Thomas Richardson. He stood at the window of his classroom on New Haven, watching his students play during their afternoon break when the sky turned an impossible shade of purple. The children, ranging from 6 to 12 years old, stopped their games to point at the strange phenomenon. Inside, everyone, Thomas called out, fighting the tremor in his voice. 20 years of teaching had taught him to mask fear with authority. As his students filed inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was about to change in their world. He was right. The Zarkali ships descended through the atmosphere with impossible grace, their crystalline surfaces now refracting the sunlight into prismatic displays that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Military vessels scrambled to intercept, but their weapons seemed to pass through the alien ships as if they were shooting at mirages. Colonial Defense Force Commander Natasha Patel watched in horror as the alien vessels bypassed every defense system, every barrier, every contingency plan humanity had established. But what troubled her most was their behavior. They weren't attacking. They were observing. "Ma'am," her lieutenant's voice cracked. "They're targeting specific locations." The holographic display showed red dots appearing across New Haven's surface. Schools, playgrounds, youth centers, places where children gathered. "Get me a direct line to every educational facility," Natasha ordered, but it was already too late. The first extraction had begun. Thomas Richardson's classroom erupted in panic as a shaft of violet light pierced through the ceiling. He threw himself toward his students, but the beam wasn't heat or radiation. It was something else entirely. Children began to float upward, their faces a mixture of terror and fascination. "Hold on." Thomas grabbed the nearest child, a girl named June, but the force pulling her upward was inexorable. His grip slipped, and he watched helplessly as his students were drawn into the alien vessel above. Across New Haven, the scene repeated itself. Parents ran toward schools, soldiers fired uselessly at the crystalline ships, and children were taken, not with violence, but with surgical precision. The Zarkali seemed to have one purpose: collecting humanity's young. In orbit, first observer Relith studied the humans' reaction with growing confusion. Their response defied all predictive models. Adults were throwing themselves into harm's way, attempting to physically prevent the collection process. Military personnel were abandoning strategic positions to protect educational facilities. The entire defense strategy of the colony had collapsed into chaos because of their overwhelming drive to protect their young. "Fascinating," Rylith noted in the ship's log. "They value their offspring beyond rational calculation. This requires further study." The initial collection took less than an hour. When it was done, over 3,000 children had been taken from New Haven. The aliens left as they had arrived, in silence, leaving behind a colony in shock and a mystery that would shake humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. Commander Patel stood in the empty classroom where Thomas Richardson still sat, his hands bloodied from pounding on the ceiling after his students vanished. "Why?" Thomas asked, his voice hollow. "Why didn't they just attack us? Why take the children?" Natasha had no answer, but as she helped the teacher to his feet, she made a promise, not just to him, but to herself and every parent on New Haven. "We're going to find out," she said, "and we're going to get them back." In the depths of space, the Zarkali ships moved with purpose toward their home system. Within their crystalline halls, the collected children huddled together, displaying behaviors that their captors found increasingly perplexing. Instead of dissolving into panic or depression, they were organizing. The older ones were comforting the younger ones. They were adapting. First observer Relith watched the surveillance feeds with growing unease. Something about these human children was different from any species they had encountered before. They showed a resilience that bordered on the impossible, a unity that defied explanation. What the Zarkali couldn't understand, was that they hadn't just captured human children. They had captured the very essence of humanity's future, and humanity would go to any lengths to reclaim it. The first phase of their mission was complete, but as Releth would soon discover, it was only the beginning of a chain of events that would challenge everything the Zarkali thought they knew about the universe and their place in it. First observer Releth stood before the High Council of the Zarkali, their crystalline forms refracting light in patterns that conveyed their growing concern. The chamber, hewn from living crystal deep within their homeworld, hummed with tension as Releth presented the latest findings from the Human Child Observation Project. Honored Council, Releth began, our initial assumptions about human offspring appear to have been incorrect. The central crystal pulsed with a deep amber light, a sign of displeasure from Supreme Observer Valthorn. Explain. Releth activated a holographic display showing the containment areas. The human children had organized themselves into distinct groups, with older ones creating makeshift teaching spaces, sharing knowledge, and maintaining order among the younger ones. They were not just surviving, they were creating their own society. They demonstrate unprecedented levels of adaptive behavior, Releth continued. But more concerning is their emotional resilience. Our suppression fields, designed to maintain docility in captured specimens, have proven ineffective. The council chamber erupted in patterns of worried light. This was unprecedented. The Zarkali had studied countless species across the galaxy, collecting their young to understand their developmental patterns. Never had they encountered a species whose offspring showed such remarkable traits. Junior observer Kexley, who had been directly overseeing the children's containment, stepped forward. "There's more," she said, her crystalline form flickering with anxiety. "We've detected unusual energy patterns emanating from their gathering spaces. They're singing." The council's confusion manifested in discordant light patterns. The concept of music was not entirely alien to the Zarkali, but they had always viewed it as a primitive form of communication. Yet these children were using it to boost morale, to comfort each other, to maintain their cultural identity even in captivity. Supreme Observer Valthorn moved closer to the holographic display. "Show me their response to isolation protocols." The footage revealed their attempted experiments in separating the children. Each time, the results were the same: increased stress levels among all subjects, not just those isolated, followed by ingenious methods of communication through walls, through vibrations, through any means available. "They possess a form of collective consciousness," Releth explained. "Not telepathic, but emotional. When one suffers, they all respond. When one achieves something, they all celebrate. It's as if they're connected by invisible bonds our sensors cannot detect." A younger council member, whose name was untranslatable to human language, pulsed with curiosity. "Perhaps we should terminate the experiment, if they are this resistant to study." "No," Valthorn interrupted, their crystalline form darkening. "This is precisely why we must continue. The humans have revealed themselves to be far more complex than our initial survey suggested. Their young possess qualities we have never encountered in our millennium of observation." Kexley stepped forward again, her form wavering with what in human terms might be described as nervousness. "There is another factor we must consider: the adult human's response to the collection." The holographic display shifted to show footage from New Haven. Human parents throwing themselves at energy barriers, soldiers sacrificing themselves in futile attempts to reach the children, entire communities mobilizing in moments to protect their young. The council watched in silence as scenes of human devotion and sacrifice played out before them. Their entire social structure revolves around protecting and nurturing their offspring, Releth observed, not for purely biological preservation, but for something more. Something we don't yet understand. Valthorn's form pulsed with deep thought. "And their response to the collection." "They are coming," Kexley said simply. Our long-range sensors have detected multiple human vessels attempting to mask their approach. They are not acting according to any known military doctrine. Their strategies are emotional, unpredictable. The council chamber filled with patterns of concern and debate. The Zarkuli had always operated on the assumption that their technological superiority made them invulnerable to lesser species reprisals. But these humans, they were different. We must accelerate our studies, Val Thorne decided. If the humans are indeed mounting a rescue attempt, we must understand what drives them before they arrive. Ryleth, you will personally oversee all observation teams. Find out what makes these children, what makes these humans, so different from every other species we have encountered. As the council session ended, Ryleth remained in the chamber studying the footage of the children. In one scene, a small girl was teaching younger children a game involving complex patterns of movement and sound. In another, older children were creating maps of their containment area using materials they had managed to repurpose. For the first time in their long existence, Ryleth felt something akin to doubt. The Zarkuli had always seen themselves as the supreme observers of life in the galaxy, the ultimate arbiters of species development. But watching these human children, seeing their indomitable spirit, their endless creativity, their unbreakable bonds, perhaps, Ryleth thought, they were the ones who had something to learn. 8 kilometers beneath the surface of New Haven, in a hastily converted mining facility, Commander Natasha Patel stood before a room of Earth's finest special operators. The chamber, carved from bedrock and reinforced with carbon steel alloys, hummed with determination and barely contained rage. Operation Starcatcher begins in 72 hours, she announced, her voice echoing off the stone walls. The holographic display behind her showed the crystalline structure of a Zarkuli vessel. Thanks to our deep space tracking network, we've located their primary research vessel. That's where they're keeping our children. Among the assembled operators sat Marcus Ramirez, former deep space salvage expert turned resistance fighter. His daughter Sophia was among the taken. He studied the alien ship schematics with the eyes of someone who had spent a lifetime understanding how things came apart. Their hull technology, he spoke up, his voice rough from lack of sleep. It's not just defensive. It's adaptive. Traditional weapons pass right through because the crystal structure shifts to allow it. But every material has a resonant frequency. Commander Patel nodded. Which is why you're here, Mr. Ramirez. Your experience with crystalline-based ship salvage might be the key to getting our infiltration team aboard. The plan was audacious. While the main fleet would engage the Zarkuli in what appeared to be a conventional assault, a smaller team would approach in a specially modified vessel. Using Ramirez's knowledge of crystal structures, they hoped to match the resonant frequency of the alien hull, allowing them to pass through as if they were part of the ship itself. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka, their quantum communications specialist, pulled up additional data. We've been receiving irregular transmissions from inside the vessel. The children, they're communicating. The room fell silent as a series of patterns appeared on screen. At first glance, they looked like random energy fluctuations, but Yuki had discovered something extraordinary. The children had figured out how to manipulate their containment field's energy signature to create crude messages. They're alive, she said, her voice tight with emotion. And they're organizing. Meanwhile, aboard the Zarkuli vessel, 12-year-old Devin Jackson had become something of a leader among the captured children. His mother's work as a quantum physicist had given him an intuitive understanding of energy patterns, and he had been the first to realize they could use their containment fields to communicate. Like this, he whispered to a group of younger children, showing them how to move in specific patterns that created ripples in the energy field. If we all do it together, the message gets stronger. The children had developed their own code, passing information between containment cells, mapping the ship's layout, and maintaining their hope. What the Zarkuli saw as simple physical activity was actually a complex network of communication. Back on New Haven, the resistance team was making final preparations. The modified infiltration vessel, dubbed Ghost, had been fitted with crystalline resonators based on Ramirez's designs. It was barely larger than a shuttle, but it carried humanity's hopes within its experimental hull. "We've identified 3 possible entry points," Commander Patel continued the briefing. "Based on the children's transmissions, we believe they're being held in the central observation chambers. Our primary challenge will be navigating the internal structure of the ship." Dr. Amara Okafor, their xenobiologist, stepped forward. "The Zarkali ship design appears to mirror their societal structure. Everything flows towards central observation points. If we can access their transport corridors, we should be able to reach the children." The team selected for the infiltration was small but elite. Marcus Ramirez would lead the technical aspects of the insertion. Lieutenant Tanaka would maintain communications with both the children and the fleet. Dr. Okafor would handle any biological or environmental challenges, and Commander Patel herself would lead the tactical team. As the briefing concluded, Patel held up a small crystal shard recovered from a brief skirmish with a Zarkali scout ship. "They think they understand us because they can observe us. But they've made a crucial mistake. They don't understand that humanity's greatest strength isn't in our technology or our military might. It's in our connections to each other." The crystal caught the light, sending rainbow patterns across the room. "They took our children thinking they would study them in isolation. Instead, they've given our children the opportunity to show them exactly what humanity is capable of. And now, we're going to show them too." The next 72 hours were a blur of final preparations. The Ghost was loaded with specialized equipment designed to interface with Zarkali technology. The main fleet took position behind New Haven's largest moon, ready to launch their diversionary attack. On the eve of the operation, Marcus Ramirez sat in his quarters, holding a photo of his daughter Sophia. "We're coming," he whispered to the image. "And we're going to show these aliens that they picked the wrong species to study." Aboard the Zarkali vessel, First Observer Rayleth was becoming increasingly troubled by the children's behavior. Their organized activities had grown more complex, more purposeful. And there was something else, a sense of anticipation that seemed to permeate their containment areas. What Rayleth couldn't know was that the children had already detected the approaching rescue mission through their makeshift communication network. They were preparing in their own way, ready to play their part in what would become one of the most daring rescue operations in human history. The countdown to Operation Starcatcher had begun, and with it, the true test of humanity's resolve was about to unfold. Operation Starcatcher began not with an explosion, but with silence. The Ghost, its crystalline resonators humming at precisely calculated frequencies, approached the Zarkali vessel like a shadow merging with darkness. Inside, Marcus Ramirez monitored the harmonic patterns with intense concentration, making microscopic adjustments to match the alien ship's structure. "Contact in 30 seconds, Lieutenant Tanaka whispered, her hands dancing over the quantum communication array. The children's signals had grown stronger in the past hours, as if they somehow sensed the approaching rescue. Commander Patel stood at the ready with her tactical team, their specially designed suits engineered to mask their biological signatures from Zarkali sensors. "Remember," she said, "we're not just soldiers today. We're the promise humanity made to protect its children." The moment of merger came with nothing more than a subtle vibration. The Ghost's crystalline resonance matched the Zarkali ship perfectly, allowing them to phase through the outer hull like water through a membrane. They were in. Aboard the Zarkali vessel, First Observer Rayleth was engaged in intense discussion with Junior Observer Kexley when the first anomalies appeared in their monitoring systems. The energy patterns from the children's containment areas had changed subtly, becoming more rhythmic, more purposeful. "Their coordination is improving," Kexley noted, her crystalline form flickering with concern. "The older ones are teaching the younger ones new patterns." What neither observer realized was that the children were creating a deliberate distraction. Led by Devin Jackson, they had learned to generate specific energy signatures that drew the Zarkali's attention, while masking other activities happening in different sections of their containment areas. Meanwhile, the the Ghost's crew moved through the alien vessel's crystalline corridors with careful precision. Dr. O'Keefe's predictions about the ship's layout proved remarkably accurate. Everything did indeed flow toward central observation points. But navigating the transparent, ever-shifting passages proved more challenging than expected. The ship's internal structure is responsive, Ramirez reported, studying his instruments. It's not just the outer hull that adapts. The entire vessel is constantly reconfiguring itself. Commander Patel processed this information quickly. Can the children's energy patterns be affecting these changes? Lieutenant Tanaka's eyes widened as she analyzed the data. Yes, they are. The children aren't just communicating. They're influencing the ship's crystalline matrix through their containment fields. In the central observation chamber, First Observer Relith noticed something unprecedented. The ship's crystal structure was vibrating in harmony with the children's energy patterns, creating microscopic changes in its molecular arrangement. It was beautiful, fascinating, and deeply troubling. This is beyond mere adaptation, Relith murmured. They're not just surviving our containment. They're learning to manipulate it. The rescue team used this unexpected advantage, following the subtle changes in the crystal structure that the children were inadvertently creating. But as they drew closer to the central chambers, they encountered their first real obstacle, a group of Zarkili observers conducting their regular studies. Commander Patel raised her hand, halting the team. Their suit's masking technology was untested against direct observation. One wrong move could alert the entire vessel to their presence. But then something remarkable happened. The children, sensing the rescue team's proximity through their energy field manipulation, began what appeared to be an impromptu concert. Hundreds of young voices raised in song, creating complex harmonic patterns that rippled through the ship's crystalline structure. The Zarkili observers, fascinated by this new behavior, turned their full attention to the containment areas. It was all the distraction the rescue team needed. Moving silently through the now empty corridors, they finally reached the central observation chamber. Through the transparent crystal walls, they could see hundreds of children, all participating in their coordinated performance. Now comes the hard part, Ramirez said, connecting his equipment to a crystal node. We need to disrupt their containment fields without alerting the ship's primary systems. Lieutenant Tanaka joined him, integrating her communications array with his resonance devices. The children's energy patterns, if we can match them, amplify them. We could use the ship's own adaptive nature against it. Dr. O'Keefe finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. Commander Patel gave the signal. It was time to show the Zarkili exactly what they had underestimated. The rescue team initiated their countermeasures just as First Observer Relith made a startling discovery. The children's harmonic patterns weren't random. They were exactly matched to the ship's resonant frequency. But the realization came too late. Throughout the vessel, containment fields began to flicker as the combined efforts of the rescue team and the children's energy manipulation reached a critical point. The ship's crystalline structure, designed to adapt and respond to all input, couldn't distinguish between authorized commands and the harmonically matched interference. Systems began to cascade, and in the chaos that followed, humanity demonstrated why you should never ever separate them from their children. The breaking point had been reached, and the true nature of human resilience was about to be revealed to the cosmos. In the moment the containment fields failed, two remarkable things happened simultaneously. The children, led by Devin Jackson, executed their long-planned response with perfect coordination, moving in precise patterns they had practiced for weeks. And the Zarkili, for the first time in their species' history, experienced something akin to awe. First Observer Relith watched in stunned silence as the crystal structure of their mighty vessel responded not to its creator's commands, but to the harmonic resonance created by hundreds of human children working in concert with their rescuers. The ship itself was singing. Fascinating, Relith whispered, their crystalline form vibrating with newfound understanding. We never considered, we never imagined. Commander Patel's voice cut through the chaos. All teams, Execute Operation Starcatcher Phase 2. Bring our children home. The rescue teams moved with practiced precision, but they encountered no resistance. The Zarkeli observers stood motionless, their crystalline forms refracting light in patterns that reflected their complete bewilderment. They were witnessing something that challenged their entire understanding of species development. Supreme Observer Valthorn materialized in the central chamber, their imposing form darkening with concern. What is the meaning of this interference? Commander Patel stepped forward, her voice steady. This isn't interference. This is a lesson. The children, now free from their containment fields, didn't run. Instead, they formed a circle around both humans and Zarkeli and began to sing. Not in fear, not in defiance, but in harmony with the ship's crystalline resonance. The effect was immediate and profound. Marcus Ramirez, monitoring the ship's responses, called out in amazement. The crystal structure. It's not just responding. It's adapting. The entire ship is transforming. Dr. Okafor's eyes widened as she studied her readings. The children haven't just learned to manipulate the containment fields. They've learned to communicate with the ship itself. They understand the crystal's language better than its creators. Valthorn's form flickered with what might have been respect. You came not just to rescue, but to teach. No, Paddle replied. Our children came to teach. We came to remind you why they're worth protecting. Young Devin Jackson stepped forward, addressing the Zarkeli directly. We knew you were watching us, studying us, but you were looking for the wrong things. You wanted to understand human development, but you didn't realize that our strength isn't in what we become. It's in how we help each other become. The ship's crystal structure pulsed with colors never before seen in Zarkeli architecture, a direct response to the emotional resonance of the children's unified presence. What had begun as a simple observation of a species had transformed into something far more profound. Lieutenant Tanaka, still monitoring the quantum communications, smiled. They're not just communicating with the ship, they're teaching the Zarkeli a new way to perceive reality. Valthorn's form shifted, expressing what in human terms might be called humility. In all our millennia of observation, we sought to understand the development of species through clinical study. We never considered that the greatest understanding might come through connection. Commander Patel nodded. That's humanity's true strength, not our technology, not our adaptability, but our ability to form bonds with each other, with our environment, even with those who might seem to be our enemies. The children began to move toward the rescue teams, but not in fear or hurry. They moved with purpose, each taking time to touch the crystal walls, leaving behind resonant patterns that would continue to influence the ship's structure long after they departed. We will remember, Rylith promised, their form brightening. We will learn from this. As the rescue teams prepared to depart with the children, Valthorn made an unprecedented gesture. The Supreme Observer's crystalline form fragmented into thousands of tiny shards, each containing a fragment of the experience they had witnessed. These shards would be distributed throughout Zarkeli society, ensuring that the lesson of humanity's children would never be forgotten. The journey home was filled not with the expected trauma of captivity, but with stories of discovery, of understanding, of bonds formed in the most unexpected circumstances. The children had not just survived their captivity, they had transformed it into an opportunity for growth and learning. Back on New Haven, as families reunited and tears of joy were shed, Commander Patel received one final transmission from the Zarkeli vessel. It was not a message in any traditional sense, but a harmonious resonance that matched perfectly with the songs the children had created. The Zarkeli had learned perhaps the most important lesson of all, that true understanding comes not from observation, but from connection. And in doing so, they had inadvertently given humanity a gift, proof that even across the vast distances of space, the power of human connection could bridge any gap, transform any barrier, and touch even the most alien of hearts. The stars shone a little brighter that night over New Haven, and somewhere in the vast expanse of space, a crystalline ship pulsed with new colors, forever changed by its encounter with humanity's most precious resource, its children, and the unbreakable bonds they forge.